Hello everyone, and with the new VR as well as the unexpected Grade 4 that has been revealed, I have been testing the new Link Joker, and oh boy, is it strong. So today I'll be discussing with everyone the new cards that have been revealed, what cards from the previous sets would be played, how the deck fares against not only the current meta decks, but also the other new decks, and well, without further ado, let's just jump right into it. The first thing we have to do is to know what are the cards that will be played in the new deck. And what better card to start off the video with than the VR itself, Alter Ego Messiah. Now, Alter Ego Messiah's skill is Act, Vanguard Circle, once per turn, cost, Soul Blast 1, and put up to 2 cards with different card names from your drop zone or Rearguard Circle as locked cards. As well as Auto, Vanguard Circle, when it attacks, choose any number of any fighter's locked cards, unlock them, and those unlocked units get power plus 10k until end of turn. So what makes these skills so good? Now let's take a look at the unlock skill first, and what we notice is that it is completely free and usable on turn 3. Compare this to Harmonix Messiah, whose unlock ability is 1. Locked behind having a grade 3 in Soul, and 2. Requires a Counterblast to activate. Granted, Counterblast is fairly abundant in Messiahs, was fairly abundant, but smart players will damage deny you so that you can't use the Counterblast for something like a Burst Monk or a Blast Monk. However, the most important thing Alter Ego has over Harmonix is the fact that you can unlock on turn 3 instead of turn 4, which is incredibly important in not only the current meta, but also the future V-BT08 meta, at least from my testing. The only thing Harmonix has over Alter Ego is the plussing, which some players think makes Harmonix a better turn 4 card and onward. And to an extent, I agree. However, unfortunately, I think we don't have the space for Harmonix in the new deck, and I will explain the reason after introducing all the cards that have been revealed. And first up of these new cards that have been revealed is Genesis Machine Deity Volkogwad, whose skill is continuous, you cannot write this card, Auto Rearguard Circle, when placed, retire this unit, and lastly, Auto Rearguard Circle, at the end of the battle that this unit attacked a Vanguard, cost lock this unit, one of your units gets power plus 10k until end of turn. This card, ladies and gentlemen, is bonkers. Firstly, it is a 30k beat stick, and with the implementation of Force 2, this means that this card will be swinging for 30k 2 crit unboosted. That in itself is all really strong, but the fact that its third skills allows it to lock itself means that you can unlock it with Alter Ego's ability for another 40k 2 crit swing. So it's a 30k 2 crit swing followed by a Vanguard attack, which has a 10k boost thanks to Volkogwad, and then a 40k 2 crit swing. That is nuts. But some of you might be wondering, how do we call this card onto field? It's a grade 4, so that means unless we're on a grade 4, we can't call this card from hand, and even if we could, it would be retired. Now, this is where Alter Ego's first skill comes into play, since we can basically revive this card from drop zone as locked, and we can get this card into drop in a multitude of ways by guarding it with it from hand early, using it as a discard fodder, or even healing it from the damage zone. But it does come onto the field as locked, so unfortunately, we can only take advantage of the full potential of this card on turn 4. Just kidding, we can take full advantage of Volkogwad on turn 3 with the order card that was revealed a few weeks back, the Clear Frame Curse Cleaning Whirlpool. Now the card skill is on screen, and if you've been paying attention, you will be able to see where this is going. You ride into Alter Ego, stack a Force 2 marker on your Rearguard Circle, then use Alter Ego's first skill to revive Volkogwad onto the circle with the marker and something else from drop, preferably a Burst Monk for the plus and the potential restand. Then use the order to unlock Volkogwad for what I like to call an early Volkogwad, where you basically have an unlocked Volkogwad on field by turn 3. An early Volkogwad is incredibly strong, especially if you start first. 30k is a magic number against a 10k base, forcing 25k guard from hand lest they take 2 damage. Even against a 12k or 13k base, they still have to drop a 20k shield to guard the attack, and usually that would be 2 cards from hand or field unless it has a heal trigger, of course. but you still have one more 40k to crit attack after your Vanguard swing due to the unlock, so your opponent would have to be careful with guarding early. From this, you can clearly tell that an early Volkogord gives you so much pressure, since in total you can deal 5 damage if your opponent no guards everything. That means more likely than not, your opponent will guard at least one of your attacks, which is likely one of the Volkogord's swings. However, the order isn't the only way to get an early Volkogord, because the next card, Manipulator of Emptiness, is the other way of getting an early Volkogord, and for common G1, it's pretty good. Its skill is Auto on Vanguard or Rearguard Circle. When its attack or the attack it boosted hits a Vanguard, cost, put a card from your hand onto Rearguard Circle as a lock card and draw a card. This card gives you early game pressure because if it hits, you can call a Volkogord from hand as locked, and on the next turn, you can swing with that Volkogord either as just a 30k beat stick along with an extra 10k power, or as an early Volkogord if your next turn is your Great Tree turn. So you force your opponent into a dilemma where they either take the damage for their plays that require CB but risk an early Volkogord which would give you insane early game pressure, or they guard the attack but your opponent won't have any counterblast for their turn. Even if you don't have the Volkogord in hand, this card is still good since you essentially call a card onto field and then you draw a card for a net +1. So that is all for the cards from the reveal that I want to talk about, and now we shall move on to what cards will be played in the deck. Firstly, Harmonix Messiah, which I did undermine earlier in the video because in my humble opinion we do not have the space for him. So why do I believe that? Well, firstly we have to consider the Great Trees and Great Fours we will be playing. We want to play for Alter Ego, of course, he is our main boss monster after all, but what about the Order and Volkogord? Well, for Volkogord, I feel we have to play 4. I've seen people suggest that you only need to play 1 or 2 since you at most can only use 2 per turn. But to me, that is a bad way of thinking because from my testing, Volkogord makes up the bulk of your pressure, and not seeing him is incredibly detrimental since you can't easily pull off multi-attacks without Volkogord and your columns aren't as big. Even with 4, you do hit games where you don't see Volkogord at all, so what good will playing just 1 or 2 do for you? So yeah, personally I think Volkogord is a 4. If you want to play less copies, I think 3 is the lowest I would go, but no less than that. So now we have for Alter Ego and for Volkogord. So and how many orders shall we play? Well, I personally would go for 4, as the order is your most consistent way of getting an early Volkogord. The Great One gives you early game pressure and can net you an early Volkogord, but it is an on hit, so your opponent will more likely guard that attack than not. The plus is also nice, and the fact that it is an order means you can't miss right into it, which is fairly relevant. So let's consolidate. We have 4 Alter Ego, 4 Volkogord, and 4 orders. That is a total of 12 Great Trees and Great Fours, meaning we don't really have much space left in the deck. We still need a decent number of Great Ones and Great Twos so that we won't break too often. That is why I think we don't have the space for Harmonix, as what it nets us with plussing, at least for me, does not outweigh the cons of A, having to play less Great Twos and ones to accommodate, and B, potentially misriding into him for our first ride, whether it be by G-assist or by the simple fact that he's the only Great Tree in our hand. That said, I do understand why people would want to play him, and in my current deck list, I actually have 2 flex spots in my Great 2 lineup, which does consist of 10 Great 2s, by the way, and the 2 flex spots are vanilla 10Ks, which you can replace with Harmonix if you like. Having only 8 Grade 2s in the deck isn't the worst thing in the world. I piloted my fair share of 8 Grade 2 decks, so I am no stranger to slightly bricky decks. But I am considering to replace those 2 vanilla Grade 2s with Ghastly Nail instead of Harmonix Messiah, our old multi-attack maker. Now the reason we would play Ghastly Nail now isn't really for the multi-attack. It's more for the fact that he is a decent beat stick and thus acts as a backup Volkogord. Volkogord is the main form of pressure for the deck, but having a backup pressure card, I feel is more valuable than the plussing from Harmonics. So that's why you'd consider Ghastly Nail for your deck. Both Ghastly and Harmonics are grade 3, so they do bump up your grade 3 count, so you can pull off a Burst Monk restand a little bit more often. Speaking of Burst Monk, he is of course a 4-off along with his brother Blast Monk. The reason we would want to play these two is for the simple fact that Link Joker doesn't really have other better grade 2s at the moment. Maybe that will change with the newer reveals, but for now, they are the best grade 2s we have here. Burst Monk is just a +1, and the restand can turn the tide of the game since you basically get an extra get to attack another time with Volkogord, as well as a second Vanguard swing. And as for Blast Monk, he is a decent soul charge engine. You do go through soul in this deck fairly quickly because of Alter Ego's skill, and you also play him for the removal to snipe some annoying cards from your opponent's field, and that is still pretty valuable. Now, what other cards can we consider? Well, let's take a look at some other staple cards that were in Messiahs. So first off, Calderon Wing, a counter charge engine, and unfortunately, we won't be playing him. You might think that's because he has restrictions, but to be honest, they aren't that hard to hit, even without having Harmonics as our Vanguard. No, the reason we will be dropping him is for the simple fact that he's not needed anymore. From my testing, we don't really use that much Counter Blast. We only burst Monk once per turn since we have to call 2 different cards from Drop Zone, and the only other card in the deck that requires Counter Blast, at least in my list, is Blast Monk, which you won't use too often since it is for the more niche situations where you have to snipe one of your opponent's problematic rear guards. On top of that, Calderon requires a Soul Blast, which is somewhat difficult to come by since you will be Soul Blasting once per turn with Alter Ego skills. So unfortunately, we will have to cut Calderon from our list. Next, we have Bellerothal, and well, you should play him, in my opinion, because he can get really big, and he can act as the backup Volkogod, since he is a minimum 18k booster once you have used Alter Ego's skill. So propping him behind some dude on a Force 2 marker makes that column as big as a Volkogod column. Granted, that column wouldn't be able to multi-attack, but it's still a decent backup plan, and as we all know, Volkogod is your main form of pressure, so having a backup plan is good. And since it's a grade 1, you don't have to waste grade 3 space. You don't have to waste as much space as, let's say, playing Ghastly Nail. So yeah, you should consider playing Bellerothal, and I personally would play him. Now, lastly, let's take a look at Treasure Child of Nuclear Magnetic Resonance. And I believe she should be played, because she's a more consistent way of generating / recycling soul, since she is a grade 1 and she does make your opponent think somewhat, as she does give another unit 10k with her skill. This is in comparison to Blast Monk, of course. But usually you would activate her skill when your opponent just no-guards the attack, since your columns are so big, your opponent would rather no-guard maybe a 1 crit attack. And that is usually the way you would proc Treasure Child's skill. So yeah, now that covers the cards that will probably be played. And now we will finally talk about how the deck holds up against the other decks in the meta and the new decks from V-BT08. We should take a look at how it fares against the current kings of the meta, Vanquisher and Revan first. The Vanquisher matchup is, to put it lightly, very easy for Messiahs. Unfortunately for Vanquisher, it will be phased out of the meta, as all they do on turn 3 is plussing and removal without a lot of pressure, and that simply won't cut it against the V-BT08 decks such as Messiahs, as they can easily outpressure Vanquisher on turn 3, or in the case of OTT, outlast Vanquisher as well as putting on consistent pressure each turn. For Messiahs, the Vanquisher matchup shouldn't be too difficult. All you have to take note of is to be careful of not overcommitting, since they can bind your rear guards, and this is especially important if you start second, since Vanquisher still has an incredibly strong turn 4. They just can't keep up with every other deck's turn 3. Now, next we have Revon. Revon has better chances than Vanquisher, but overall it is still a winning matchup for Messiahs. Revon now occupies the niche that pre-banless Tachis used to have, which is the balls to the wall, turn 3 kill turn, but less consistent and more piece reliant. And they can pull it off sometimes. But overall, they lose steam after their turn 3, and you can easily outlast them since they have to commit more hand to field to get the same amount of pressure as Messiahs. So overall, the tides of battle is in favor of Messiahs in this case. Now let's take a look at the new decks. Up first we have Majesty Lord Blaster, and overall it is a favorable matchup, but it's still tough. MLB is a stupidly consistent deck, and pluses pretty decently, but they just don't plus enough to be able to deal with the pressure Messiahs can put up every turn. But they can still cheese some wins. When you don't have PGs in hand, so do be careful. Overall, the game plan against MLB for Messiahs is to keep yourself low on damage in the early game and then out-pressuring them turn 3 and onwards. Remembering to save PGs in hand for the Vanguard swings, and if you can stick to this plan with enough blood, sweat and triggers, you will emerge victorious. We're almost done. We only have 2 more decks to talk about, and now we shall be discussing Blade Master. Unfortunately for me, it is a losing matchup. Blade Master doesn't have the burst of power compared to Messiahs or even Revon. But what keeps them in the game is the fact that they have very consistent power level across every turn. Their early game is incredibly strong with cards like Lava Flow and Garan, which are just 13k attackers on turn 2, potentially even turn 1 if they start second. Then the icing on the cake for them is the fact that they have a very easy field wipe. This is problematic for every deck, but it hurts the most for Messiahs, since you have a high grade count, meaning more of your cards have no shield. The only real way Messiahs can beat Blade Masters is with a healthy dose of luck. And, well, here's a tip from me. Do commit at least 2 cards from hand early game if you could, preferably your Manipulator of Emptiness, because your opponent most likely can only retire one rear guard with Berserk Dragon skill, and they will have a more difficult time retiring the other rear guard, ensuring that Garan won't be able to proc, and Lava Flow will be slightly more difficult to proc, but usually you'll proc even with, because they just flood the field in the early game. So overall, Messiahs is gonna have to take the L on this one. The final deck we will discuss is Susano, and the Susano matchup is complicated. Overall, it is a losing matchup, but this matchup is one where an early Vocal God is crucial, as from my testing, an early Vocal God gives you enough pressure to break through the smaller hand of your opponent when they are on grade 3 or even grade 2. If you can get the early Vocal God, you should be able to win this matchup about 70% of the time. But in the end, it is still an unfavorable matchup for Messiahs. And thus, we have... What? We still have one more deck? Oh, right. Popping Party. Well, as for how Messiahs fares against Poppy Pa, and that is all, folks. Thank you for sticking all the way to the end. If you liked the video, do hit that like button and consider subscribing. I want to do more of these videos in the future, and hopefully I won't take as long as I did on this one, since the script is pretty damn long. So anyways, see y'all next time. Stay safe in the current environment, and well, see ya.